this deaf woman's interpreter was arrested. And Judge Caprio's decision at the end of this video will absolutely shock you. Her name is Marisol Vega. She has been deaf since birth. Her world is shaped by hands, not sound. And yet, today, she stood in a courtroom where no one understood her language. She searched the room, her eyes pleading for the one person who could help her communicate, her interpreter. But the interpreter was nowhere to be seen. With worried hands, she signed a simple question. "Where is my interpreter?" Yet the question floated unanswered. Judge Frank Caprio watched her. He didn't know sign language, but he knew what confusion looked like, what fear looked like, what injustice felt like. He turned to the clerk at his side and asked the question that changed everything. "Where is the interpreter assigned to assist this defendant?" The clerk hesitated. Her voice lowered. Her eyes dropped to the paper. "Your Honor, she was arrested last night." The air inside the courtroom stopped moving. Even the lights seemed to hum quieter. Judge Caprio slowly set his pen down. "Arrested?" The clerk nodded once. Obstruction of a police officer. Shock. Disbelief. Anger rising beneath the surface. A deaf woman, unable to hear police commands, was arrested for not obeying those commands. And the interpreter who tried to help her was also arrested. Marisol signed again with urgency, her hands trembling. No one responded. Judge Caprio turned back to the clerk. "What are the charges against Miss Vega?" The clerk read aloud. "Failure to comply with lawful commands, resisting arrest, reckless driving, failure to appear in court." Judge Caprio raised a hand. The clerk immediately stopped. He looked at Marisol. She stared back with fear. She couldn't understand a single word spoken in that courtroom, yet her entire future was being decided in it. He asked gently, even though he knew she wouldn't hear, "Can you hear me, Miss Vega?" She watched his lips and shook her head. Her hands formed signs again, asking what was happening, whether she would be taken to jail, why no one would tell her anything. The judge turned his attention back to the clerk. Had she requested accommodations? Was the system aware she needed an interpreter? The answer, cut like a blade. Yes. Marisol had submitted an ADA request form 2 months ago. It had been ignored. Emails from the interpreter service had been ignored too. A voicemail from the interpreter agency had gone unanswered. No one had taken responsibility. The judge leaned back in disbelief. So the system knew, and the system chose not to act. He ordered Officer Daniel Kim, the arresting officer, to appear. Moments later, the officer stepped forward, his shoulders rigid, his eyes narrow. "Officer Kim," Caprio began. "Tell this court what happened." The officer described the events. He saw Marisol driving slightly over the speed limit. He initiated a stop. He approached the vehicle. He spoke commands, but Marisol remained silent. He interpreted silence as defiance. She reached for her glove compartment. He interpreted movement as danger. A bystander had called an interpreter to the scene, a certified ASL interpreter named Naomi Clark. Naomi attempted to communicate for Marisol. She explained the situation. She told the officer that Marisol was deaf, that she couldn't hear him. She asked that he give Marisol access to her legal rights. She asked him to follow ADA law. Officer Kim admitted to the judge. He found Naomi signing interfering, so he arrested her. The courtroom gasped. Judge Caprio stared at the officer with a controlled fire in his eyes. "If a person cannot hear your commands," the judge said slowly, "failure is not defiance." The officer looked down, his mistake now illuminated for all to see. Just then, the courtroom door opened. A woman stepped inside, eyes tired, clothes wrinkled. The interpreter herself, Naomi Clark, fresh from a jail cell. Judge Caprio stood, something he rarely did, and addressed her directly. "Miss Clark, on behalf of this entire court, I apologize for what you endured while upholding the law." Naomi nodded. Her voice shook as she explained everything. She had rushed to the scene when she heard a deaf driver was in trouble. She saw Marisol frightened and confused. She saw police shouting commands Marisol could not hear. She saw injustice unfolding, and she refused to step aside. For insisting that Marisol deserved communication, she was handcuffed, taken away, thrown into a cell. And Marisol, a deaf woman, spent the entire night in custody, with no way to communicate with any human around her. She signed to guards, signed to other detainees, signed to the walls, but silence swallowed her every plea. Judge Caprio took a deep breath. His verdict was ready. He looked at Marisol. He looked at Naomi. He looked at the officer. He spoke clearly. "Here is what the evidence shows. A deaf woman asked for what the law promised her, communication access. That right was denied. Her signing was misunderstood as aggression. Her disability was mistaken for disobedience. Her voice was taken from her. And the interpreter who tried to give it back was punished." Judge Caprio struck every charge from the record, every single one. Gone. Marisol Vega was free. Her record would be cleared. She would receive a formal apology from the police department, and she would be financially compensated for the interpreter services she was denied. He turned to Officer Kim. "You will undergo 40 hours of mandatory ADA training and provide a written apology to both Miss Vega and Miss Clark." Then the judge did the most important thing of all. He changed the future. He implemented new policies. a 24-hour ASL interpreter hotline for all police interactions, mandatory disability awareness training for every police officer in Providence, interpreter requests flagged within 48 hours. ASL accommodation instructions included on all court notices. The courtroom fell silent, everyone absorbing what justice looked like when justice truly listened. Marisol signed a final question. "Did I do something wrong?" Naomi translated with tears in her eyes. Judge Caprio shook his head softly. His voice filled the room with a truth that needed to be heard. "You did nothing wrong. The only failure here was the failure to understand you." Then, he did something more powerful than a ruling. He turned to Naomi and asked her to teach him 2 signs. He faced Marisol directly. His hands moved slowly, carefully. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." Marisol placed a hand over her heart and signed a message back. "You gave me my voice." Judge Caprio replied softly. "You always had a voice." We finally learned to listen. Justice wasn't spoken aloud that day. Justice was signed. Justice was understood. Justice was delivered. 3 weeks later, the reforms had already saved 32 deaf and hard-of-hearing residents from wrongful arrests. Naomi's charges were dismissed. With a public apology from the police chief, Marisol received recognition from the mayor for her courage. Judge Caprio kept a handwritten note on his bench. "Silence is not resistance. It may be a language you never learned." And behind his seat, a framed sign in American Sign Language, "Justice for all and everyone." If you believe every police department should be required to understand disability rights, comment yes right now and subscribe to Order in the Court, so stories like this are never ignored again. Justice spoke in silence, and the world finally listened